Last minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. Is okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
what's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM 1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable. I am Wendy Batts here with my friend and co-host and fellow Master Instructor, Marty Miller. Marty, how are you?
I'm good, Wendy. How's everything over there?
Everything is great. And this week is a follow-up to what we talked about last week when we covered the tennis elbow. Again, this was a topic that came in from our listener who had some questions about the differences. So if you missed last week, be sure to go back and listen because there is going to be some differences between tennis elbow and golfer's elbow, which is our topic for today. So Marty, why don't you kick us off and go into golfer's elbow for us.
Yeah, so last week we talked about lateral epicondylitis, hence now we're moving over to medial epicondylitis. So we'll define that, we'll review the anatomy, and of course we're going to discuss what is golfer's elbow, what causes it, and then we'll go through with some solutions through the corrective exercise strategy, just like we did if you saw last week's episode. If you haven't, you'll get great information here, but we would highly recommend going back and checking out that on the lateral epicondylitis or tennis elbow. So we'll follow the same roadmap today.
100%. And like I said, last week, because we focused so much on the extensors, this time, as you mentioned, Marty, we're going to talk about the medial side of the elbow. So as you stated, it is called medial epicondylitis. That is basically golfer's elbow is a lot easier to say, but if somebody starts complaining and they're like, oh, my elbow hurts, and they kind of point more on the medial side, you want to think that this inflammation or irritation of these tendons are on the inside of the elbow. So you want to think about the medial epicondyle, which is the bony elbow. If it's on the inside, when the flexors, so your wrist flexors are in distress, that is what causes that. So if you can see the image, you're going to kind of see the areas that are highlighted. That's going to be the flexors, and that's where we're really going to focus on trying to calm down. So therefore, the hinge of the elbow can hopefully go back to the way it's supposed to be and not causing some of that discomfort.
Yeah, and if you're getting this, we didn't actually touch on this last week, so that's my fault. If you're getting this from a sport, Wendy, you did mention the racket, things like that, make sure you work with a sports professional who can make sure you're fitted correctly. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to eliminate anything, but it may give you a better opportunity to not face some of these issues from overuse or from improper equipment fitting, right? If in tennis, if the grip is too wide, that might not be proper for you, and that may help cause it. Same thing if you're golfing and you have a bad swing pattern, you may put more stress on your elbow than you need to. Now, if you're getting this from work and things like that, it's how can you rehabilitate through corrective exercise and then minimize the amount of work you have to do or strengthen it enough so that way you can handle that workload. But if it is coming from a sport, besides what we're going to give you, I would recommend working with a sport coach to see if there's a flaw in your sporting technique or equipment that is also adding to this.
Well, it's interesting that you said that because, I work a lot with golfers, as you know, Marty, and with tennis. And so I'm unfortunately very familiar with both of these injuries. And I was asking some of the pros that we were with, like, when they were talking specifically about golfer's elbow, I'm like, what, in your opinion? Now, again, these are opinions, but these people have been working with some of the top PGA professionals for a really long time. Do they think is causing that? And it's exactly what you said, improper fitting because there are different grip sizes, but a lot of it too, especially in golf, and why this has become such the quote golfer's elbow is the grip that they're actually taught and whether it's going to be convenient for their joints. Some people learned how to do it on their own to interlock their grip. Some people learn not to interlock, but their hands are over on top of each other more so than maybe they should be based on their movement pattern and their swing pattern. And so, like you said, if you can hire a coach, have someone look at your equipment. See, I know it's expensive to get fitted, but if this is going to be a sport that you're in it to win it, and you're going to be doing it for a long time, making sure that it is the right length for you, that your irons are a certain length, that you've got the right angles and degrees on your heads. I mean, all of that can affect the club head speed for sure, but it's also going to minimize the impact. Now, if you're terrible like me, unfortunately, when you hit the ground and you make these crazy divots, that also causes a lot of force, especially if you try to swing to kill it, which instead you're not supposed to do. You're just supposed to gradually swing and let the club do the work. But if you haven't got that through your thick skull, Wendy, and you hit the ground, that's a lot of impact and stress with dirt that doesn't go as easily as a ball on a tee. So a lot of these things, you want to know the patterning of what your client, if they're experiencing this, may be doing, and then trying to figure out, kind of take a few steps backwards to find out what you can do to help them with this case. So therefore, if they're going to keep playing the sport, what you can do to minimize this type of inflammation and problem.
And before we get into the anatomy, the other thing about it could be your stringing, what type of string and the tensile strength of the string on your racket, as well as the stiffness of your shaft. So all these things have a play. Not our area of expertise, but we want to mention that. So as we move into the anatomy, the primary muscles and tendons that will be affected in golfer's elbow are those that are going to flex the wrist and fingers, as well as pronate the form. So go back to your anatomy. Good recap here. So the main four muscles: flexor, pronator, right? We talked about this in what we said in the anatomy. These muscles are on the inside of your forearm. Then we have the flexor carpi radialis, a muscle involved in wrist flexion. Pronator teres, a muscle responsible for, again, forearm pronation. And then the flexor digitorum superficialis and profundus. Sounds like a mushroom, but muscles involved in flexing the fingers. So these are the main. I'm sorry, it does profundus. I just, it's okay.
I think it's such a fun word. I love throwing that out there.
Just Latin. So profundus, fundus, whatever. We'll get there. But these are the muscles and muscle groups that need to be addressed.
Yes. And I'm really glad we did not talk about that during tennis elbow. So if you're listening to both, like you said, Marty, the strings matter, because if they are, as synthetic strings versus non-synthetic strings, you need to figure all of that out. But yes, the shaft too, it is. And think about the weight of the club, and, whether it's going to be, what is it, titanium now, and all these, like, some of them are super light. Some of them are really heavy. I used my father's clubs for a long time because I'm left-handed. He's left-handed. He can afford expensive clubs. I cannot. So I got some of his hand-me-downs and I loved them. However, they ended up being really heavier for me, which I didn't think they were, until someone said, no, you need a different club. It matters, because I was using a man's club. I needed a smaller shaft and lighter club. And so once I did that, I'm like, oh, wow, this is way easier. So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there.
All right. So as we, sorry, my screen just got something popped up here. So just like we did in the tennis elbow, we had first start with inhibiting overactive tissue, right? There's a reason that these muscles are inflamed. So step one in the corrective exercise continuum is self-fascial techniques. As I mentioned, I love getting a massage and I love when they dig in my forearms, but for yourself, we're going to recommend any of the massage guns. So when you use this device on the flexors, it's best approach with your arm at rest, palms up. And again, there's going to be a different density in the muscle tissue of your flexors versus your extenders. So you may need to change the intensity or even the head back and forth, right? Or you have to know the techniques, how with this head and this pressure, it's good for the flexors, but I have to back off a little bit on the extensors. So when you begin, divide the form into 3 equal parts and slowly cover each third individual with the device. And when you find a tender spot, just like we've always said, kind of marinate on that, or just move it around it slowly. Don't just go back and forth real fast. Let that percussion get into that area and do what it's supposed to do. So to help you visualize this, think of doing 1 strip along the ulna, 1 for the interosseous area, the area that connects the 2 bones, the ulnus and the ulnar and the radius, and 1 for the radius. The strip on the anterior radius will be effective for bringing relief to the flexor pollicis longus.
Yes, you're going to get quizzed on this, Marty, afterwards, just trying to learn how to say it or spell it between your mushroom and all of these fancy words.
Got it.
Yeah. I mean, as a manual therapist, guys, this works wonders. And I use my fingers. That's why you'll see the picture on the bottom. So if you do hold some sort of license and you're licensed to go through and touch, or if your client is experiencing this and they go wherever Dr. Marty Miller lives and can get massages all the time, you just tell them to go through and really focus on the 3 parts of the inner forearm, because it can make a substantial quick difference. It's one of those where if somebody knows what they're feeling and they find, or if you're using a device and you hold those tender spots, it really will matter. And it's interesting to see what your fingers do while someone's working on them, because like all of a sudden they start curling up and then you'll have them extend, because these muscles are super, super weak. Or overactive and causing some of that irritation. So the more that you can go through and do even some pin and stretch, that's one thing, Marty, that's not even on here, but once they go through the static stretching, which we'll talk about next, if you go through some of this and you add different movement patterns while the device is going over it, someone's working on it, or we go into the stretches, it can also help get better range of motion through there.
Yeah. And for all of you just joined us on the Master Instructor Roundtable, I'm Marty Miller with co-host and fellow Master Instructor Wendy Batts, and we're talking about golfer's elbow. Some exciting news though, Wendy. I want to jump in here first and let everybody know that this episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients, enjoy half off of all certifications, specializations, and access to free CEUs and more. All of this just for $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One.
All right. So now that we talked about what we can do to downregulate the overactivity, let's go ahead and talk about stretching. So again, the muscles that you work with the device, we're used to doing things with a foam roller. Obviously, it's harder to do that when you're talking about your wrist. So as soon as you're done using a device, or if there's somebody that can go through and strip one of those areas of the muscles that we just talked about, we want to go into static stretching. So here we're going to focus mainly on static stretching the wrist and the finger flexors. So again, now we're focusing on the inside of your forearm. So you do that by sitting up nice and tall. So think about your 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. You're going to extend your arm out in front of you. So elbow is straight, your arm is straight out. And then you're going to take your hand and place it on your palm. And then you're going to go into bringing your fingertips back. So we're going to go out with your palms facing down. You're going to then, you can see it in the picture, they bring their fingertips up, but you'll see she's not pulling back on the fingers, right? She's kind of going back, utilizing her other hand. And you just gently want to do this. It's not something that's abrupt. You want to get a gentle amount of pressure into that forearm and feel a good stretch. Of course, because we're doing static stretching and we're looking for autogenic inhibition, we're going to hold that stretch for 20 to 30 seconds. You can repeat this if needed. I tell people to repeat it throughout the day, but it's really important to make sure that you hold for that extended period of time, because we want to ensure that we're getting those muscles to relax. So therefore we can try to get it to stop pulling so much on that joint.
Now, great, Wendy. And, I talked about this on the tennis elbow, lateral epicondylitis. Wendy and I did a podcast. You can find it wherever you'd find any NASM podcast. So go to the NASM YouTube channel, put in Master Instructor Roundtable, get a grip, and you'll get even more advanced training techniques that will help you prevent all of this and get them more into functional strength when they've gotten past the medial epicondylitis or lateral epicondylitis.
Yes.
So as we move forward here, it's strengthening exercises. These are going to be very simple ones. And as I said, in that Get a Grip, you'll find more challenging ones that they can progress to. So wrist extension, hold a light weight like a dumbbell in your hand with your palm facing down, and then slowly lower, pause, and repeat up. Perform 3 sets of 15 repetitions, and that's going to help the extensors. Then we have isometric wrist strengthening extension. So you'll see here, while seated, place your affected form on a table or arm of a chair. Make sure that your arm is supported so you get less movement from the elbow. Place your opposite hand on the back of the affected hand. And then, press your affected hand up using your opposite hand to create resistance by pressing down. Continue for 10 seconds. Remember, this is slow, controlled tempo, slowly increasing the resistance, gentle release, and then start just with one set of 15 repetitions.
And Marty, I tell people you can do this anywhere. We did this all the time, and it really does work. So basically, if it's hard to visualize what that looks like, if you have your hands at a 90-degree angle, again, like you mentioned, we're not doing anything with the elbow, but if you take let's say your left hand is in a fist, it's a gentle fist. You're not going to punch someone, right? So you're just kind of bending your fingers back, and you take the opposite, your right hand, and put it on top of your left, the top of your left hand, and then you just slightly press up. You're going to feel that those muscles start to work. And all you're doing is you're the one that's applying, meaning you being the client can do this on their own. If you're the trainer, you just want to see those muscles kind of pop out. These are really easy exercises to do, but isometric strengthening has shown in all kinds of research to really start to benefit someone. You don't need anything other than yourself. And, and being able to do this for, 10 seconds, and then just trying to get yourself to relax and then repeating, that continuous movement is going to help strengthen those without putting a lot of stress, and you don't need any external weight.
Great points, Wendy. And then also next, right? So grip strength, that's key. We've talked about it before, how it's a great assessment. We covered that last week as well. I would highly recommend you get a digital grip strength dynamometer. They're very inexpensive, and you can put that as a part of your assessment. And then if somebody's having issues, you can see if there's a variation right versus left. And as I said last week, there is some indications now that is a sign of recovery. So if you know someone's benchmark, you'll know if they're fully recovered from workouts. So a couple ways that you can do this here is a stress ball or hand gripper. Squeeze that stress ball, use a hand gripper to help strengthen those muscles involved in gripping. Perform sets of controlled squeeze for about 10 to 15 repetitions. And as I mentioned last week, get a different size stress ball, right? So, or some of the hand grippers, you can change the width, because that way you're putting your hand in different positions, changing the length tension relationships and strengthening through different ranges of motion. And that's a great way to change it up, right? And then the pronation, supination, eccentric exercise. Wendy, thank you for that picture there. Give some visualization if you're watching us today. So protect the wrist on a table, because a lot of people get their elbow and then obviously their shoulder into it. We want it just from the wrist. Hold a light weight, could be a dumbbell. They do make products for this, like little sticks that you can add weight. The further or longer the stick is, the harder it's going to be, right? Because you're putting load further away from the rotation or the axis of rotation. So keep your elbow bent to 90 degrees, your palm facing up, rotate your form inward or into pronation, then return to the starting position and build up to 3 sets of 15, maybe even 20 reps. So you're building that muscular endurance and driving blood back to that area, which helps heal tissue.
Well, and I think it's important too, Marty, because, some of these exercises that we're talking about, it's like, wait a minute, I did this for tennis elbow. And you want to think, because it's a hinge, and you've got to think of the way that the muscles are. If you go into pronation and supination and you have your hand right below your elbow, you're going to feel all of these muscles and how they work together. And because it is a hinge, we want to make sure that we've got good technique and form and activation of the right muscles, because we're constantly moving our hands in different directions. We're going, that's the beauty of us being able to do, hand circles. It's just like your shoulder. We're able to move in a lot of different planes of motion, but you also want to think the way that the wrist moves, it is a hinge joint, right? So we've got to be able to think, yes, we're moving it in different positions, but we also don't want to stress out the joint. So like you said, Marty, being creative is important, but thinking about, okay, if is it the medial side? Is it the lateral side? Because that part, especially on what you need to stretch and down regulate, is going to be extremely important. The activation side, if you're activating both, will be fine, because as we've talked about and throughout the entire model, that even though a muscle is overactive, it's still going to be weak. Now, we don't want to cause, obviously, just focusing only on the overactive muscles, because the weak muscle is what's allowing some of those muscles then to be in a shortened position. But we want to focus more on those muscles that are weak. However, including certain things that will work on the overactive muscles is also going to be important, as long as the inflammation is down and the client can do it pain-free, of course, without compensation. That's also going to benefit them long-term.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks.
Great points, Wendy, as always. So speaking of points, let's talk about key points. Understanding the cause of golfer's elbow. We'll put in here, normally do your assessments, right? Understanding range of motion, grip strength, etc. Review the anatomy as needed to ensure your proper programming, right? You have to know that anatomy. And then design that proper corrective plan. And as I said last week, I'll say it again, a lot of people forget about the soft tissue of the forearms. That's why they feel so good when you get a massage, because they're always being used. And those muscles can be overactive and underactive as well. So treat the whole body that way, not just your major joints. And then learn how to design a corrective exercise plan. Massage guns are so easily accessible nowadays. It's a great way to downregulate that soft tissue safely, so you don't need to get a massage. And it allows you to work within your scope of practice by teaching them how to do that. So hopefully people got some great ideas from today's podcast.
Yes. And again, we do appreciate those comments and questions, and we're very, very grateful for you guys listening to our podcast. So if you want to contact us with some certain questions that you may have or a specific topic you would like Marty and I to discuss, you can always email me at wendy.batts@nasm.org, or you can find me on Instagram at wendy.batts13.
And my information is right here, dr.martymiller72 and marty.miller@nasm.org. So please send in requests. We'll get to them as soon as we can. We'll let you know when they're airing. And this is why we do the podcast, for your education.
Yes. Thanks, Marty.
Awesome. Well, as always, Wendy, thanks for you. You took these questions, put these together, great information. And thanks for everyone that joined us today. And most importantly, we definitely hope to see you next week on the Master Instructor Roundtable.